Hi everybody, these months were so busy, I had no time to make this really important YouTube episode that I had in mind for a long time. This episode is a must to know for every colorist, filmmaker or video content creator. I've been working on this for a while, collecting information and combining it to a one short but saturated episode. I even discovered a lot of useful information for myself while been preparing it for you. So this episode is a deep dive into one of the main but complicated to keep it correct and perfect steps in any color grading workflow is saturation. So today we will talk about what is saturation, what are the perfect skin tone saturation levels, saturation harmony in cinema and how to use it creatively, and finally complementary saturation. I will also introduce my new tool that I've developed. It's the Saturation Indicator LUT that indicates saturation levels and colors and could be used in any software like DaVinci Resolve, Adobe Premiere, Final Cut Pro or Photoshop and will speed up your color grading process a lot. So I will go deeper about it later, but now let's start from the beginning. So what is saturation? Saturation is an intensity of the color. It refers to how pure or intense a given color is. 100% saturation means there is no addition of gray to the color. The color is completely pure. At the other extreme, a color with 0% saturation appears as gray. For example, in video editing softwares, we have the vector scope, which indicates the hue and saturation values of our image. The easiest way to understand it is to look at, for example, HSV 3D model, where H is a hue of certain color, S means saturation, and V is value, in the other words, brightness of the color. The vector scope indicates the same, but in 2D view, it indicates the hue and saturation only. The more saturated a color is, the more it's pushed out from the center of the vector scope, and more vivid or brighter it appears. So the center point of the vector scope is 0% saturation. It's where our pure blacks, whites and grays are. But the other thing is that darker object feels more saturated than the brighter one, even if they have the same saturation levels. Let me show you. Let's take a look on this example. There are two apples. This second one looks more red, more saturated, but if we will take a look on the vector scope, these reds over here on the first apple and these reds on the second one are almost on the same saturation levels, with just a little hue difference. But the first apple feels much less saturated, isn't it? This is called density of the color. If I light the power window on this first apple, like so, we'll change the composite mode of this node to luminosity, so we would affect the brightness only, but not the color or saturation of it. Then go to the curves, grab the midpoint for example, and push it down. Look at it. It became darker, but also feels more saturated and rich now. But the saturation levels of the vector scope are still the same. Look at it, before and after. This technique is widely used in cinema, so if you want to get more richness of the color, then the color should be denser, but not oversaturated. As you see, saturation is a very powerful tool. By understanding it correctly together with the contrast, it evokes different emotions and enhances the story. Okay, now let's move to our second question. What are the perfect skin tone saturation levels? There are no any perfect skin tone saturation levels. It all depends not on the skin type only, but mostly on the story and the look. But if we would talk about the natural lighting scenarios, we are get used to see the skin tone saturation of around 30–35% of the vector scope saturation levels. Okay, let me introduce my Saturation Indicator LUT. By the way, it's available by the link in the description of this video. So what this LUT is indicating? It divides an image to the saturation levels and indicates these levels in different colors, where colder colors mean lower saturation and the warmer ones stronger saturation. At the top we see the white indication. This means as a warning that this area of an image is oversaturated and its saturation is almost clipping. This LUT should be applied as the last node after Rec. 709 conversion or very top adjustment layer, and all of the saturation adjustments should be done before this LUT. Then after all of the adjustments, just disable or remove this indicator LUT. So what are the benefits of this LUT? First of all, it really helps to match the saturation levels in different shots, especially the skin tone saturation. And the second, it's a very powerful tool to analyze the reference images from the cinema and photography and get the same results in your projects. Let's take a look on some still images from the movies and I'll show you some saturation standards they usually use, and the LUT will help us to find them. Okay, so we have the still from the Joker movie. Let's analyze the saturation levels using this saturation indicator LUT. I'm mostly interested in his skin saturation levels now. So apply the LUT. As you see, his skin saturation is on the green-yellow saturation levels, where the green is natural skin tone saturation and yellow is a bit higher saturation, and it's mostly happening in his skin highlights here. Nothing goes towards this orange indication, which is oversaturation for the skin in this kind of natural daylight conditions. Look at his face. The highlights are indicated in yellow, which is perfect, and skin midtones are indicated green. Okay, let's check another still. Let's analyze his skin saturation levels too. As you see, everything is the same. In the same saturation levels as in Joker. Skin highlights are saturated up to yellow indication and midtones stay indicated green. Switch to the next one. This still is from John Wick movie. Enable the saturation indicator LUT. OK. You see that the most saturated areas are where the fire is happening. The red color indication shows that these areas are very saturated. But let's take a look on his skin saturation. Let's go closer. Yes, it's the same levels as on the previous stills. Skin stays in green-yellow indication levels. Let's go to the next still. Let's check her skin saturation. In this case, it's a little bit more saturated, because there is more yellow indication on the skin, but it's mostly because of an overall warmer look and skin lighting. But it still stays in these green-yellow indication levels. For example, if I would go and add a little bit more saturation on her skin, because when you're grading and your eyes are getting a bit tired, you can't really see where the best skin saturation spot is. Let's just push it up. Okay, I feel it's oversaturated now, but maybe would like to park it here. Fine. To make sure I'm not oversaturating, I can always apply the LUT and check it. So I clearly see some orange-red indication, which means that the skin is a bit oversaturated now. So I have to keep it in yellow-green indication for this kind of lighting conditions. Surely it can be more or less saturated depending on the creative look and story. Okay, let's go to the next still. In this still I feel that his skin saturation is stronger. But when I apply the LUT, I see that it's mostly indicated in green levels, with a little bit of yellow indication, and it's even less saturated than in the previous still. Let's go back to it and enable the LUT. Do you see it has stronger yellow indication? That means that her skin has higher saturation than his skin here. But why does his skin saturation feel stronger? Let's compare them. It's all about the density of the color. His skin tone is darker. That's why we feel even richer saturation. Okay, let's switch to the next one and check her skin saturation. It's the same. It lives in green-yellow indication levels. Let's go to the next still, enable the LUT. Everything is the same. As you see, in all of these movie stills with natural lighting, the skin saturation is on the same levels. Let's switch to the next still. This is from Barbie movie, and this is the most extremely saturated movie I've ever seen. But let's see the skin saturation levels here. As you see, their skin is a bit more saturated than in the previous stills, while yellow indication is stronger and dominating, but still in these yellow-green levels. It's not oversaturated. So all of these skin saturation levels in all of these stills, like this one, here, her skin, over here, this one, and Joker, they are all in almost the same levels. So the conclusion is that in these natural lighting conditions, the skin saturation when using my saturation indicator LUT should be in the green-yellow indication levels. In terms of look development, saturation is one of the fundamental elements you should be considering. Same as contrast, saturation plays a huge role in how the colors in your image make the viewer feel. This leads us to the third question. Saturation harmony in cinema and how to use it creatively. You may know about the color harmony rule like 60-30-10, where 60% is dominating color, it sets the mood of a scene, 30% secondary color or complementary color, it supports the dominating color, and 10% is highlight color, aspect of the scene. I constantly find that saturation in this color harmony has the same power, where the most saturated part of an image catches our focus and attention. So let's try to analyze some movie stills and check their harmony in case of saturation. For example, in this Joker movie still, we have the most popular complementary color harmony with colder shadows and warmer highlights, where this main colder cyan color tone is a dominating color because it covers the most area of the shot and sets the mood of a scene. And this complementary yellow-orange color, which immediately catches our focus and shows an attention points to what we as a viewer have to look at. Surely, there are a lot of other things that pushing our eyes to the main character of the scene, like composition, framing, focus, lighting, but also the color contrast and saturation. While the main focus should be on our character in this scene and his emotions, the most saturation is also pushed towards him to these yellow-orange tones, while this color background is very low saturated. Let's enable the Saturation Indicator LUT and see how the saturation levels are distributed in this image. As you see, the main image area is indicated in blue, which means a very low saturation levels. Take a look on this indicator chart again, and our main focus point is indicated in yellow-red, which means very high saturation. This is so powerful because our eyes are always focusing on the most saturated part of an image, especially when an image is not moving a lot. Okay, let's switch to the next still. So this one has the same complementary color harmony with the blues in the sky and warm brown horse and warm skin tone, but in case of saturation, let's enable the LUT. You see that the most saturated area is the sky and the character's skin tone, so it immediately keeps our focus on this image area while everything around is low saturated. Let's go to the next still. In this case, we do not have this strong complementary color scheme, everything sits in warm tones, but our focus and attention is pushed towards the character and horse. First of all, it's perfectly shaped with the light beam that falling on them, but also with the saturation. Let's enable the LUT. As you see, the green, yellow and red indication shows that this area is really saturated, while everything else indicated in blue magenta is very desaturated. Look at this. This is where the most saturation is happening. Okay, let's switch to the next still. Look at this, how strong saturation it has. Yes, it's creative, warm look, and this warm light brings her skin tone to a very high saturation levels. Let's enable the LUT. Do you see? Everything around her, which is indicated as magenta, is totally desaturated. But in the center, her skin and dress is very high saturated. It's like a saturation vignette, isn't it? Okay, next still, this one is different. It keeps the most saturation in the background with all this warm candlelight, because while there is no any strong action happening, the mood of the scene is more important. That's why the most saturation is also there. Look at the LUT indication. The center is indicated in red and it's the most saturated here. Okay, and the next still, we have conversation and characters' emotions, which are the main focus. So that's why it's also the most saturated area too, while this cyan background is much less saturated. So the last still is from the same John Wick movie, but we have the wide shot here when he jumps through the window. Sure, the character keeps our focus, because mostly he is the moving object in this almost static shot, but if we will check it in case of saturation, as you see, everything is low saturated around him. But if we will go closer, we'll see that the most saturation is in the character's rim light. Look here, this red indication shows that these areas are very high saturated, and also it's a warm color which is complementary to these cyan building tones. For example, if I'll go and desaturate this orange color, let's add the node, grab this orange color and push it down. You see, now it's not catching our eye so well. It still keeps the focus because of this backlight on the character, but together with the complementary color scheme and saturation, it becomes much more powerful. We can check the saturation levels on the vector scope using qualifier. While this orange color takes a really small part of an image, I can't see its levels on the vector scope, but using qualifier focus circle, I'll show you where it sits in case of saturation levels. Look at the vector scope. The circle shows how high saturation levels of this orange color are. That's why I prefer using LUT for that. It's faster and easier to see these most saturated parts and their levels. So the last question I want to talk about today is complementary saturation. I called it that way because it's all about the complementary colors and how one color saturation affects the look of complementary color. Let's check some stills from the movies again. So what do we have in this case? As you see, this scene color and mood is really cold, but we still feel this skin tone color here. Let's apply the saturation LUT, and it shows that the skin of our character is almost desaturated. Especially this magenta indication shows that there's no color in these areas, but we still feel the skin saturation. It's all about this complementary sign color saturation here. Let me show you an example. If I'll take this sign color here in hue versus sat curve and desaturate it, we are noticing that an overall image became more like a black and gray, with some small green tint on the skin. But there's no human skin tone at all. Let's maybe remove this green saturation too. Do you see? No skin tone color. But when I start adding this complementary cyan saturation back, the skin color saturation feels stronger too. And if I'll go even higher, the skin feels also more saturated, but I didn't touch any red or orange saturation at all. This is all about this saturation level distance. The stronger one of the complementary colors is saturated, the more saturated another color feels. Let's check another still. As you see, here's the same colder, bluer look, but in this case we have some of the skin tone saturation here, but this saturation is very low. Let's do the test, for example. Enable the LUT. You see the skin sits on the blue indication level, which is really low, and it's perfect for this kind of colder look. If I'll take the skin tone orange color and add the saturation, also more saturation in reds, we see that skin became indicated in green-yellow levels now, but when I disable the LUT, her skin looks way too saturated and unnatural, because the split difference between these cold tones and skin tones became too big. This is not natural daylight look, and we do not need the skin to be on these green-yellow indication levels. In case to get the natural skin saturation, I would have to push an overall image to the warmer look. I'll show that in the next and last still for today. This one is from Barbie, called Night Look, and it's perfect because this look tells the story and creates the mood. But in case of complementary saturation, we still feel some of this skin tone saturation here. Not too saturated, but great balanced for this kind of look. But let's do the same as with previous stills. Let's take this complementary blue and desaturate it. Do you see? Their skin became gray. That means there were no skin tone color there. And this is because of that cold look. Background is colder, bluer than the skin, and this saturation difference makes us feel the skin tone in an image even when it's not there. Just realize that if the scene would be a natural warm and not so cold as now, let's experiment, for example. Push an overall image using our offset to the warmer side. Something like maybe this. Maybe not so warm. Something like that. Okay, it's not a precise grading, but more like experimenting here. And I feel that the shadows are too red, so cool them down. Okay, like so. Maybe add some midtone brightness in gamma. And small touch for the shadows again. Something like that. Do you see how this image looks now? Yes, the mood is changed, but this way we get the perfect skin saturation in green-yellow indication levels. So these saturation levels work for natural looks only, but for colder looks skin should be also colder and less saturated, same as they did it here. Look how they pushed an overall image towards the colder look. Same rule works in the warm images. When the scene is warm, the skin tone will be warmer and more saturated. So we are not inventing the wheel, but as the colorist we are trying to get used to the wheel that is already invented and keep it running perfect every time, and then just sometimes adding our own sauce on it to tell the story better. So thanks for watching. As always, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, because it supports me and my YouTube channel. If you'll have any questions, I'll be happy to see them in the comments below. But now keep the perfect saturation in your projects, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!